Hey folks, today I've got Eric Min, CEO and one of the co-founders of Zwift, for another of the CEO Interview series. We're going to dive into all of the behind-the-scenes nuances in really the business side of Zwift. You may have seen the FitFile podcast that we did recently here. Not really sure which one will have dropped first, this one or that one, but in that episode we go ahead and talk through a lot of more of the technical side and kind of the behind the scenes and the vision of Zwift, but in this case we're going to dive into the business of Zwift over time as well as now. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep. So we'll get to Zwift in just a second, but I think part of that story is understanding what you did before Zwift from a business side that sort of lights up that entire path. What did you do before Zwift?
Yeah, I worked on Wall Street, and I worked part of a trading desk, and then went on to build a business around trading systems. And then Zwift is really my third job, my career.
Okay. And how did you get from that to Zwift? Like, what was the thinking in starting Zwift?
Well, I think I got a lot of my experience in how to build a business from my first one. This was all about doing something I'm really passionate about, and it took a little while to figure it out, but landed on what Zwift is today. Just leaning into something that I have been doing. I'm an enthusiast cyclist, and it's always a danger when you're trying to build a business around your passion, but this one felt right.
Now, as we talked in the FitFile podcast, that was really kind of taking that you wanted a way to ride indoors when you moved to a new city. But as you mentioned there, you were not the only person that was part of Zwift. Who else was there at that time?
So my co-founder from my partner from my last business joined me. Okay. I think he is the one who kept me grounded. He's not the enthusiast cyclist, I am. There was another co-founder, Scott Barger. He was with me on this journey in London when we started the business. And then, of course, John Mayfield, the person who started the software project. And the four of us really, were the ones who started the business.
So in the case of the app side, so what consumers are used to is what I would say John, kind of his biggest component there at that beginning. What was your kind of component, or what was your role in Zwift at the beginning?
I think I'm the person who brought the band together.
Yep.
I'm the person who was probably shooting pretty high about what the business could be. I'm the one who was selling the dream to the investors and the partners, and so maybe the ringleader is the way to describe me. But I am definitely not the technologist who created the Zwift what it is today. But a lot of the what I would want as a customer is baked into what Zwift is today.
I remember the very first time I saw Zwift was a literal coat closet in Eurobike. Do you remember this?
I remember that, yeah.
You guys didn't have a booth that year. You didn't have a conference room. You had an actual coat closet. It was like the most hilarious thing.
Yeah, we found some corner, right? We had a laptop, and we showed you Zwift.
Yeah. Taking back to those days, how is that different than today? Obviously, it's a much bigger company and a platform, but what was those? That was, I guess, the first year of Zwift, roughly?
That must have been 2015.
Okay.
Maybe it was 2014.
Might have been 2014.
Yeah.
It was very early. It was at Eurobike, and it was just remember you putting it on a counter, much like the counters in this room here, right? And then in the back of this coat closet. And was that from a business standpoint back then? You had obviously John starting to make the game, or not starting, but kind of continuing that. Were there other people involved from a development standpoint at that point?
Yeah, so Alaric, my partner, is a software developer. He's multi-talented. He built the back end so that we can turn the game into a multi-user experience. And so really those two were the ones who put the pieces together. And then of course we hired some of the gang from my last company. Some of the developers from Rio de Janeiro, actually, who are still with us.
Okay, wow.
And so they helped. It was a core team. But we started very small, just like any other startup.
Where do you have developers or employees today? What are your focus cities, if you will?
We have about 100 people in the LA area. We have another 100 or so in London, another 30 in Rio, and then the rest are just sort of remote. We're about 300 people.
And you have a pretty big facility here. Having walk around it today, it's pretty big. Do you see consolidation of this facility over time if people are more remote now? Or
I think it's, we moved into this beautiful space right before COVID struck, and then everything changed after COVID. And so I think, we've got this hybrid workforce, and it's very difficult to bring it back to like 1 or 2 offices. I think we're kind of in it for the long haul. And just being better at and managing, remote teams.
Yeah, it is a stunning space. I'll put some like imagery here, but it feels very much like a Google or something of that realm. Like there's just so many little touches. Like I love all the cycling stuff that's around and all these things. Going back to those early days, you mentioned in the FitFile podcast that a lot of the apps that were back then in that time frame were very kind of singular focused, right? And there wasn't a lot of social element of it. With that in mind, most of those apps were basically developed by like a couple people, right? And they were really small teams, and they didn't tend to be investor backed. But that's a big difference to Zwift, which is quite investor backed. Take me through your thinking as to kind of why you went that approach versus just doing it yourself.
So I thought it was an opportunity that we could chase and fund the development of and accelerate that development. We could have done this sort of organically, but it just would have taken more time. Software requires a lot of upfront development if you want to do it at scale. So we chose the path of raising capital very early on through friends and family, and that helped to like seed the business and get it off the ground. So it's been a journey for us. I mean, we raised a fair amount of capital because the ambition's pretty big, and it still is. But obviously, the markets have changed and the environment has changed, and we're adjusting to all that.
Okay. Back then, when you first started, I mean, obviously you tried the platforms. Who did you see as your primary competitor at that time frame?
I didn't think of anyone as a direct competitor. One product that I would like to credit, because it was my inspiration for helping to set up Zwift, was, remember Tour de Giro?
Yeah. That's way back when.
Yeah, exactly. That, of course I've used other products before, video based, but Tour de Giro, I did this race. There were like maybe 5 or 6 other people, and it felt like I was with them. And I said, you know what? The graphics is terrible. There's not many people, but it was like, this could work at scale. This could work.
Yeah, it's funny that app has like legendary cult-like status in the indoor cycling community, right? It was very, very niche.
Terrible name.
Very few people knew about it, but it was one of those ones that if you were around in that era, right? People are like, "You use Tour de Giro?" It's like, right? It's like ordering a secret menu or something like that, right? So, kind of changing topics briefly. We walking around today. You have a solid bike collection here. Roughly how many bikes do you as Eric own?
I'm embarrassed to say, but I'm a bit of a collector of modern bikes. Okay. I do have a couple of like old bikes, but I have this thing for bikes, and I probably have somewhere in the 20-25 bikes.
Okay. And have you ridden all of them?
Not all of them.
Okay.
It takes a while to cycle through them.
Is this like sneakers where you collect it but don't ride it, sort of thing?
Well, like there's one bike that I really want to ride. It's a Richard Sachs bike. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a steel bike. It's a builder that I've known for a long time. When I was a kid, I couldn't afford it, so I have it now, and I just need to go out and ride it. But I love bikes.
So I ask every person this, which is, obviously you travel a lot. I see that in your Strava feed and things like that. If you could go and do, what is your favorite ride or run, but favorite ride in the world? Like any spot in the world that your first thing comes to mind, like, boom, I love this ride.
Some of the bigger rides that I fantasize about is like riding through the Pyrenees or the Alps, and I'm doing that, La Marmotte in about a month or less. But the rides that I really enjoy, I'm a creature of habit, are the local rides that I do back in New York, or the rides that I do in California. And it's less probably about the routes, but it's about the community, right? It's the people. That makes all the difference.
Okay. Speaking of those people, there's been a lot of change at Zwift over the last year from a leadership standpoint. Maybe talk us through essentially the last year and kind of where you've landed now from an executive leadership perspective.
So COVID really took us for a ride. And on the back of COVID, we grew, like doubled our business. And of course, like many others, we thought the growth would just continue for some time. And we scaled our business, our operations, sort of to match the ambition. Of course, there was COVID ended, and then there was a lot of correction. And so it took us a couple of years to kind of right-size the business. And I think where we landed is now a business that's sort of like the size pre-COVID. And this is a size that I'm very comfortable with, and we can already tell that when you're not scaling your business for a large operation, fewer layers of management, you can move much faster, and we're seeing that already. So, yeah, COVID was a bit of a godsend, but yeah, it bit us also.
What do you have? What's your rough employee count today?
About 300.
Okay, and what is obviously your title is officially CEO, but what do you see as your day-to-day focus? Are you on the product side? Are you on the investor side? What is your kind of area?
Yeah, so certainly I'm also the chairman of the board, so I'm also, managing the investors. But I'm at the end of the day, I see myself as the consumer, right? Like I use a product regularly, and I lean into, how I think about the product and the features, and so I'm very much, embedded in the product team, and so that product is super important to me. And I think how I think about how I want to spend my time going forward is really like how do we lean into to do more for the community. Okay. Kind of going back to basics.
Yep, gotcha. That makes sense. Are there areas that, going back to basics, that you'd want to see Zwift focus on? Obviously, you're the leader of that, but in terms of things that stick out in your mind as like, oh yeah, I wish we could really finesse this area or stick the landing better in this area.
Yeah, so it goes back to like, the core of Zwift is still the cycling experience. We really need to lean into that. The launch of the ride is going to help us do that. I mean, what we know today is that there are millions of people sitting on the sidelines because they're telling us that it's complicated to get on to Zwift. It's expensive to get on Zwift. If you just want to try Zwift, it's quite a big hurdle. So we're doing everything we can to simplify, to bring the cost of getting onboarded lower on the hardware side. And so that we're still on that journey because there are millions of cyclists out there who I think have should and want to ride indoors, whether it's our platform or others, right? Because I think cycling is, and this is going to be a journey, but cycling should be something you do indoors and outdoors, right? It should not be as seasonal as it is today.
How do you track those millions of people? So at this point, you've been around for a decade roughly, and COVID saw this huge burst of people. How do you track the leftovers, which are still millions of people, but what's going through your mind to get those people into Zwift?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about like, well, how big is the market? You just look at the activity on Strava, or you look at the people who tune into big media outlets, or how many people tune in to watch the Tour de France. And we have access to all this data, and it suggests that there are just a lot of people out there still. And so rather than dilute our efforts and go after other, let's say, experiences, whether it's rowing, of course that's been on our minds before. I think we just need lean into cycling, because I think let's really cover that off before we start venturing and investing in other areas.
What do you think is a blocker for those people today? For the millions that aren't using indoor cycling at all, what's the biggest blocker that you see?
I think it really comes down to the complexity of getting onto Zwift, both on the hardware, predominantly on the hardware side. If you try to explain to someone like how to get on Zwift in the old days, well, you need a trainer, and you need to have the right cassette, and you have to take your rear wheel off, and that's very complicated for most people. I know plenty of cycling enthusiasts who can take off their rear wheel but can't put it back on.
Right. No, I will plead the fifth on knowing people like that. So with that in mind, you have this untapped area. At the same time, you've also got investors, right? As you mentioned, you guys have raised a ton of money. I mean, publicly you've raised, well, there was a round for at least $500 million, and obviously other rounds before that. How do you balance that scenario where you have raised an incredible amount of money and you have investors that want a return on that versus sort of a, I don't want to say it's stagnating in terms of your growth, but there's a point where you've kind of not plateaued, but effectively plateaued to increase that return back to those investors?
Well, first of all, we're really excited about the ride. But I think where we are aligned between the investors and, let's say, management is about serving the customer. If we serve the customer, it should lead to, all the outcomes that we're all looking for. So the focus is like, let's do the right thing for the community. Let's lean into that, and I think the outcome should just, I think we'll all be aligned about the outcome for the investors.
Okay. At this point, is it challenging for those investors to get an ROI on that billion or whatever it's been?
Yeah, look, we have investors who invest at the height of the market. I mean, and Zwift isn't the only one. There are lots of other investments, and we just have to kind of adjust to that. Now, having said that, the markets are the markets. We can't control that. And so we're just going to stay focused on the business, and we're going to try to do fewer and bigger things. That's been sort of the message internally. Like, let's lean into, our core business, which is cycling, and really stay focused on the community.
How do you think, so looking at that kind of balance between those things, one of them is that recent price increase that you guys have had. And it's something that, you signaled, I think, on CNBC a year and a half or so ago that was likely going to happen. Do you guys feel like you stuck the landing on the communication side of that?
My belief is that the product is worth $20. And look, some people are going to disagree. Price increase is always controversial. No one likes price increases. But what I didn't want to do was make excuses for why we had to increase prices. I mean, we didn't raise prices for 7 years. So if you look at, in today's dollars, we're probably making less money per subscriber now than we did 7 years ago. That's how much inflation has crept into our business. And so, we're just keeping up with inflation. So it's, but I understand and sympathize with customers who just don't like price increases. I get it. I don't either. But at the same time, we need to right-size the business. We need to make all the things that we need to do to ensure that the business is sustainable. I think all of us want Zwift to be around for years to come. And this was sort of a tough decision that we had to make.
Have you crossed the magical boundary of 1 million paid subscribers?
We have.
You have? Okay.
Yes. I know.
Congrats.
Yes.
I was wondering when that was going to happen.
Yeah, that happened. That happened some time ago.
Okay, well, congratulations on that. Do you think, you mentioned a little while ago that part of that process, and we've seen obviously the very public layoffs over the last, long while, but more recently this past spring or early winter. Do you feel Zwift is right-sized now? Do you think it's leaner than you want it? Do you think it's, where does it fit in your mind?
I think we're at a great size. I don't think it's super lean. Mm-hmm. I think we have the capacity to do lots of great things. But it will be fewer things. And so what we've decided to do is just let's not make the speculative investments, and let's focus on the things that we're really confident about and prove to ourselves that we can operate and move faster and deliver. So that's the focus.
Okay. From a tech standpoint, I think everyone in the cycling tech industry is part tech geek and then part cycling geek. How do you balance getting distracted by shiny new tech areas like VR or those sort of things that you could easily say, oh, we're going to invest resources to have a Zwift VR experience versus how do you think through that?
So we haven't done much of that. I mean, we had VR support 9 years ago, right? We had Oculus Rift. And right away we knew this is too cumbersome. I mean, I barely like to wear glasses when I ride, let alone this heavy thing. I think we're still years away, and I know this just speaking to people who are in that industry. But leaving that aside, and then there's AI. So we do use AI for productivity, like development productivity, and maybe some of that will creep into a product experience. But we don't really go after the shiny stuff. We should always stay on top of what's going on and how that can help our business. But I think we'll just stay super focused on what the customer needs are, and to the extent that technology can help, great. Otherwise, like it's just a distraction.
I'm glad you mentioned AI because that checks the box. I feel like every interview has to have an AI somewhere, right?
We don't talk about it.
Yeah, it was on my list. It was the next question. So, but I think it's important to understand how companies are using it or not using it, right? I think there's definitely huge examples. You mentioned the back-end development. Do you see other areas where it could be useful in the Zwift realm?
I think as these tools become more sophisticated, maybe there are ways for it to create content for us, generate generative AI. But certainly on the development side, there are tools that are making our developers more efficient, and that just means that we can ship more things faster.
Do you have a group within Zwift that looks at emerging tech, that looks at that their sole job in life is to look at other technology
There are a couple of people, including John Mayfield. Okay. We're always tinkering, and there are companies, AI companies, and VR companies really who want to collaborate with us, and I still think we're a little bit, that technology is still far away.
Okay. What's your proudest moment at Zwift in terms of accomplishment or a moment in time over the last decade?
I think, I've been passionate about Zwift from the very beginning, but when we announced the closed beta and 30,000 people signed up in a matter of a couple of weeks, I'm like, oh wow, okay. Yeah. I'm not the only one interested in this. There are a lot of other people at a global scale who want to see this thing come to life. So, we were lucky to have early product market fit. And so we were able to just drive the business faster and invest more aggressively. Because if you don't see that, then you're going to slow walk or get it wrong by overinvesting. So I think we were lucky. Timing, all of those things. So that doesn't happen often.
So looking at investing in product areas and things like that, obviously it was fairly public that there was talks between you and Trainer Road and other things like that. Why haven't you invested more, if you will, in that kind of structured training side of it?
Yeah, it's about focus, and I think we tried to do too much over the last few years. And I think when I say we're focused on cycling, training is a big part of that. So we're going to lean into training. We're going to do two things. I think we want training to be easily available on our, within Zwift, but we also acknowledge that customers might have a third-party training product that they use. So we've launched the training API for limited number of partners, but the plan is to open that up. So we want as many training partners to connect and to Zwift, but at the same time, for those who are less sophisticated, for example, I think we should be able to offer that out of the gate.
It feels like over the last, if I were to plot the history of Zwift and how you interact with partners, right? There's been a definitely up and down relationship there. It does feel like over the last year-ish, that's changed to being more open. You talked about the training API, and there's other things around integration, eventually with the frame there with other companies. What led that mindset shift?
So we've always wanted to do that, but I don't think we had the team to do it. Mm-hmm. We finally have the team and the focus to do that. So we're investing, deliberately in that area. We want companies to connect to Zwift, and there's a lot of demand for it. So why not? So we're finally making that effort.
Okay. Changing topics to a whole different direction right now. Your sponsorship of the Tour de France, the Women's Tour de France, avec Femme. Talk me through that in terms of how that happened, how that the whole thing.
Yeah. So that relationship started many years ago, probably 7 years ago. I got to know the CEO of ASO, the person who manages the men's Tour de France. And so when COVID hit, there was a real opportunity for us to host the virtual Tour de France. And so it started actually for Tour for All, I think was a sort of a pilot. We did a charity event with all the World Tour teams who couldn't race outside, right? Many of them were literally locked up in their homes. We did that was aired, and it got a lot of positive response, because one of the things that we wanted was both male and female events, distances, number of stages, TV coverage to be equal. And that was successful. We raised $250,000, I think, for a charity. And then I think it was for Doctors No Borders. And then that led to the conversation of hosting the virtual Tour de France, which they weren't going to have because of COVID. And that was also an opportunity for us to say, well, if we're gonna host a men's Tour de France, we need to have a women's Tour de France as well. And so that was sort of putting ASO sort of on the spot, because on the back of that, they have to bring back the women's Tour de France. So we kind of predicted that could happen. Yeah. And if that opportunity would open up, we were going to jump at the opportunity to sponsor and be the lead for that. So yeah, this is the third year running.
And you guys had a 3-year sponsorship, correct?
3-year sponsorship. I expect that to carry on.
To continue.
Yes.
From your standpoint there, obviously there's a business element to any sponsorship. Are you seeing the return on investment you want from either a business standpoint or from a non-business perspective there?
I think it's both. It checks both boxes. It is definitely brand building. It's the right thing to do for starters, right?
Yep.
It's, everyone should be thinking about how we can support gender equal sporting events. So that gives us a lot of good vibes about what we're doing, supporting women's cycling. And from a business perspective, it definitely we get credit for supporting that event. The coverage is pretty amazing. It's the second largest bike race after the Tour de France, the Tour de France. Yep. So it's already getting pretty great coverage. And then in terms of the brand building, that's a multi-year thing. It's hard to measure.
Gotcha.
But I think we feel pretty good about it.
Okay. One of the things that was kind of in that same vein, talked about a few years ago, was the Olympics and getting virtual cycling into the Olympics. And I think you were targeting 2028, hopefully, for that. Where does that stand now? Where does that effort stand in general?
Yeah, it's hard to say what the IOC is thinking. I've heard talks about maybe having a separate esports event from the winter and summer. I think all of this will come to a head, I think, after the Paris Olympics.
Yep.
And so we have just a couple months, and then we'll find out, is there something in 2020 Olympics, or is it something like a 2029,
right.
separate esports Olympic event? And my point of view is I think it might be actually better if it's a separate thing altogether.
Gotcha.
For IOC as a business, it's probably a better thing because it's a whole new set of sponsors, et cetera.
Yep.
So we'll see. I don't have enough insight into what IOC is thinking,
sure.
But I think it's going to be one of those two. I think 2028 is a real possibility. Maybe it's a 2029 esports Olympics.
So in the changing directions again towards this stuff behind you here, we talked a lot about that in the FitFile podcast, and really that transition between what was the vision of the Tron bike, right, the fabled Tron bike, into what sits here behind us. But one of the things that I think changed in that most notably is the fact that you went from a design of the Tron bike that was totally Zwift centric and that you built everything end to end to a design here where you're focused on the frame and the handlebars. Take me through the process of deciding to go to like a partner split model versus doing it all yourself.
Well, the original design was also meant to handle partner trainers, but we wanted to also build a brand defining product, sort of like a premium product. Yep. And then from there you can work your way down. So we decided, rightfully so, to pull the plug on it because we thought that even our product was going to be too expensive for the market to be at scale, large scale. But a lot of the, we don't have to make a trainer. Like there are plenty of great trainers out there. So when we took the approach of the ride that it is today, we focus on the parts that just doesn't exist today, which is the frame and the controllers, and then made sure that we launch with one or more partners, and tried to fill a gap where we saw maybe lack of innovation, and the innovation is around what do we think is the best experience? So what kind of hardware do we think will lead to the best experience for Zwift? And I think price is super important. I mean, all our studies suggest price is a barrier on the hardware side. So I think the ride is meant to sort of, it's easier working with partners, it's affordable.
How soon will we see? So obviously this is launching with Wahoo, but technically it also works with the Zwift hub back there as well. How soon until we see other trainer companies that will be compatible with the frame?
It's coming. It's not years away. It's so it is coming, and we'd like to do that as soon as possible. But yeah, stay tuned on that.
In that scenario, you have someone that goes out and buys a trainer. They are, though, now essentially tied into Zwift. How are you thinking about that, where people can use it on Zwift, but also other platforms? Like, because when someone goes and buys a cog-enabled trainer, right now that requires a Zwift, effectively, either play buttons or controller to make that happen.
I mean, our focus right now is to optimize the experience for Zwift. We made all this investment in hardware. And the focus is to optimize it for Zwift, and we're working with our hardware manufacturers so they can adopt our, compatibility. So that's really our focus, and the focus is just the user experience. So we believe that our hardware is best suited for Zwift, and so that's a choice that consumers would have to make.
Gotcha. So at this point, is there any plans to open up the ability to shift with cog-enabled trainers to other platforms?
Not at the moment. That's not our focus, and I think it would just confuse, just make the launch of the product more complicated.
Okay. Let's talk about cheating. So, and in this realm, and up until this point, you have an entire team of people that basically is focused on catching, is probably the wrong word, but effectively catching cheaters in pro level races, right? Why? And they're very smart people. We've had meetings with them, and I've talked to them, and they use deep data and stuff like that. Why isn't that team also looking at more amateur type cheating?
So that process of validating performance at the highest level on Zwift is very labor intensive, very expensive. That's not something that we could deliver at scale. It's no different from World Tour races versus like your community races, right? It's a different level of like performance verification, right? So it's not that we don't care. It's just we can't do it at scale. It's just impossible at the moment. But I think we are thinking of ways how we can provide better performance and fairness at the community level, which is the heart of like Zwift, right? I think the elite racing is fantastic, and that's an important part of what we do. But what's even more important is to have a great, allow the community to have great experience on Zwift racing. And just to give you some sense, like the Zwift Games, for example, we had 350,000 members of our community racing the Zwift Games, right? So that's way more important than 1,000 people who are racing at the most elite level. So just trying to balance the two is what we're trying to manage.
Gotcha. What's your favorite feature of Zwift?
Ooh, favorite feature. The favorite feature of Zwift could be, do you remember we had a feature where you could recharge a battery? So that we used to have a feature. We tucked it away, but I think it might come back with the controllers. But the idea that you can have a battery on your bike, a virtual bike, and you pick the battery. You want the small battery or the bigger battery? Bigger battery has more weight, but can hold a bigger charge, and the small battery is lighter, less charge. And the fact that you can use that throughout an event, for example, and you could have a power up. And so you'd have to, you can burn your watts to charge your battery.
Interesting. So sort of like a electric vehicle style thing.
Yeah. But like you're not cheating because it's your watts, right? So I think that I'm super excited about that as a feature that we tucked away, and I think we should bring back. And I've told the product team about that with the release of the ride.
Okay. Where do you see that gamification versus realism balance going in the future? Do you see more of gamification as Zwift, or you're happy with where the balance is today?
I think, let the community choose what they want to do. I think we'll have events that will be really gamified because now we've got the hardware controllers to create that experience. Or you can have events that are more traditional. And I think, again, this goes back to we should let the community choose and let them create, the events that they want to enjoy. So I think I think I'm all for all gamification, but there are some customers who are really old school, just want traditional, and they're more aligned with like being a simulator. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I think that's there's a whole nother experience that I think we haven't unlocked yet because the hardware hasn't been there.
Gotcha. Cool. So I think the last question then is a bit open-ended, which is, what's your teaser? So in past CEO interviews, there's been a teaser of something that's coming down the road. Obviously, this just happened, so you can't talk about this because it just happened. But what's your thing that you got coming down the pipe here?
Yeah, I think a teaser is like we're finally going to deliver features that the community's been asking for. It's taken us a while to get there, but yeah, I think you're going to see rapid delivery of those low-hanging fruit that customers have been really asking for, and I can't wait till those get those are shipped, but it's all coming.
Okay, perfect. And then any final things that you wanted to get out that you're like, oh, I wanted to talk about this, but Ray didn't ask?
Yeah, no, look, the ride is something that we've been working on for 18 months, and it's great to be able to announce it and ship within 2 weeks. It'd be great if we could announce and ship at the same time, like the old days, but we're super excited, and I'm super proud of our team working just overdrive for the last 18 months to deliver this product, and I think this is going to help us unlock new people, but also to keep our existing community more engaged and kind of move away from indoor riding being a seasonal activity and more like part of cycling culture. I think that's the big, exciting opportunity for Zwift.
Cool. No, I agree. As I said in my review, I think it's one of those things that it really shifts the price kind of arrangement, if you will, of the indoor smart bike realm, and it's really going to challenge. I think that being at this price point now is just basically half of what most indoor smart bikes were.
I hope this drives innovation, right?
Sure.
Other competitors or new competitors to want to build something maybe even more affordable.
Yep. Perfect. Well, again, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it. And again, if you didn't see the other interview where we sit down, myself, Des of DesFit, and Eric, talking about the technology side a bit more and kind of just all sorts of fun Zwift stuff, including a deeper dive into that Tron bike, then definitely go check out that linked somewhere above here, or it will be very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.